Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Mendte. On this week's show, South Jersey Congressman Donald Norcross calls Donald Trump a freaking idiot in a virtual town hall. I ask him if he stands by that comment. North Jersey Congressman Albio Siriz says there will be a compromise on the HERO stimulus bill and Americans should be getting money soon. Camden County's mayor is proud of his once crime-ridden city. They had nothing but peaceful protests last week. Not the case in Trenton. Our Phil Andrews was there, and we talked to a man from Trenton whose business was looted and says the state did nothing. And now, my interview with Democratic Congressman Donald Norcross from New Jersey's 1st Congressional District. In the midst of violence across the country and looting and places on fire, Camden, New Jersey stood out as a shining example of peaceful protests done right. I know you were there. What did Camden do that other cities didn't do?
The seeds were planted actually years ago when the new Camden County Police Department was formed. They did quite a bit of study on what worked and what didn't work across the nation. Camden had his issues with the police department in the past, and they came up with a model called community policing, where the efforts were put to doing this together. We can't do this alone. We need to do it as part of the community. So as each of the sectors were brought online, the officers would literally go door to door, knock on those doors, introduce themselves, and work together with those residents. Well, they've taken that attitude and that philosophy all the way through till today. And I think that's what helped instill trust. They saw what happened on TV in Minnesota, and then they know what they experience day to day with the policemen in their neighborhood. That instead of seeing a police officer 10 years ago and the first thing kids would do is run away, today they're running, but they're running towards the police because they built a relationship, one of trust, something that doesn't happen overnight.
I would imagine that the anger was palpable while you were there and marching, but you still had to have a feeling of pride that the city wasn't being looted, that the city wasn't being torn down. And I remember the reputation that Camden used to have, and it's come so far.
It has, and those are incremental steps working together. But I can't say there was any pride in my city and that the peaceful protests. We were just so outraged at watching the torture and murder of a U.S. citizen and the complete disregard when you saw the faces of those officers. The vast majority of officers are in it for the right reason and want to help people. But we still have these hot spots that are happening around the country, and it certainly isn't a country that we should be or that we truly are. We need to come together.
Let's talk about coming together, because I read a quote from your Facebook town hall when you commented about Donald Trump and saying, and I'm quoting you, that he was a freaking idiot for suggesting the military come into towns to help out. Do you stand by that comment?
Absolutely. And I think in many ways that was being kind. When we see the President of the United States, through his orders, use tear gas, rubber bullets to clear out peaceful protesters so he can go do a photo op using the Bible, the Holy Book, as his prop. Yeah, I stand by that. Instead of coming together as a nation saying, what we saw here was wrong. We need to fix it. We understand your feelings. He starts talking about when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Compassion doesn't even come into it. The idea that somebody was murdered and we're not feeling that as a human being. Yeah, I stand by those words.
And yet, I think you're probably going to need Donald Trump in the future for New Jersey, for Camden, for your district, because when I spoke to the mayor of Camden, for instance, he said, we're not going to survive unless we go through some major cutbacks and unless we get federal funding.
We did our part. It's called the HEROES Act, almost $3 trillion, where we set aside $500 billion for states and $375 billion for counties and municipalities. That's sitting there waiting. And it's not just the House that believes this. The Federal Reserve that day talked about, we have to do this. We have to get that money back into the states.
Mitch McConnell says the bill, unless he's changed his mind, you may know better than me, but he said the bill was dead on arrival. They're not even going to take it up. And what he said, and I think that part of this was aimed at New Jersey, he's not going to bail out states that already had financial problems, that already were a fiscal mess.
Well, that just tells you how uninformed he is. There are always issues in every state when it comes to fiscal issues, but in no way does that compare to what was dropped on our lap with the pandemic. When you literally have to shut down the economy of the state, that has little to do with the financial well-being of the state prior to that. And nobody's asking to fix our problems that were there before. We're just wanting to help us when we need it most. That was caused by the pandemic, not by any other means.
When speaking of working with Donald Trump, he brought up the idea of infrastructure in one of these stimulus bills. I would imagine you would be all for that.
Of course. He brought that back and when he was running for president and when he was first elected, he said, we're going to do it. And then the second year, he said he was going to do it. Listen, we've heard this all before. We understand how important that infrastructure is, those roads, those bridges, the ports, the things that keep America great.
I saw recently that you were able to secure $250,000 for Rowan University and Rutgers University. And I looked at what they were doing with that money, and it's all going to help train frontline workers, either at retirement homes or in hospitals. Your wife is a frontline worker. How's she doing?
She's staying healthy, or as she says, we're doing what we're supposed to do. And that's the attitude of most of the people I see out on the front line, whether it's the retail clerk at the ShopRite or those in the hospital to the police and fire. They understood what their job might entail as they went into that profession. They do it because they care. And that's why what I call the 3 T's, the testing, the tracing, and the treatment. We've awarded several grants to our local universities, Rowan, Rutgers, not only to invest in a vaccine and testing, but also to create that next front line of workers who are going to trace out this pandemic.
Sarah, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for spending the time to talk to us, and I'm glad you and your family are well.
Good to see you. Jersey does matter.
That was New Jersey's 1st District Congressman, Democrat Donald Norcross. Still to come on Jersey Matters, crime-ridden Camden is now peaceful Camden, a peaceful protest in the midst of looting across the country, and the mayor couldn't be prouder. We'll talk to him next.